All right, let's take a quick look at Kali Linux here. So Kali Linux, as I mentioned, was or is distributed by Offensive Security. It used to be called Backtrack if you were familiar with it back in the day. Now they just call it Kali Linux, pretty much the same thing. Kali Linux, just newer. You can download it in a virtual machine, put it in VMware Workstation Player. You can put it in VirtualBox, ESXi. You can put it physically on a laptop or an old machine if you have the ISO. You can buy a Raspberry Pi and put it on that. There's a lot of different options, but I'd recommend just a virtual machine to get started. And again, just be careful of where you're installing it and what tools you're using. If you're going to play with it, put it maybe in an isolated environment where it's not touching anything else. And again, just be safe with it. The most important thing about Kali Linux is you need to know the password. Right, so there definitely is a password to get into this. The default username is root, R-O-O-T, and the default password is Tor. It's root backwards, T-O-O-R, okay? Great, so we're in here, and this is Linux, right? So Kali Linux is a distribution of Linux. It has some security and penetration testing tools built in, so we don't have to go install it. I am not a Linux whiz or an expert, so I appreciate that all these different packages and tools are installed for me and I don't have to go get them and try and figure out how to use Linux better. So the first thing I want to mention, just for those newbies here, what we're seeing right now on the screen with this dragon and some buttons and stuff, this is a graphical user interface, a GUI. Another thing we're going to mostly use with Kali Linux is a CLI, a command line interface, and this is really going to be the nuts and the bolts of what we're going to do in Kali Linux here is going to be from this command line. So you do need to get a little bit comfortable with this and play around with it. I'll try and walk you through as much as possible here. So just like Windows, there's a bunch of directories or folders and files that are in different places. On Canvas, I do have an article that kind of talks about where things are and where you can find some stuff. It just takes some time playing around and moving around directories to kind of get the hang of it. Anytime you want to learn more about a tool or you're not really sure what something does, you can use either the TAC-TAC-H switch or you can use the man tool, and that will kind of tell you what's going on with that tool, help you with it. So for example, if I say, I've heard of this thing called cat, but what the heck is cat? Okay, so it tells you, it says cat concatenates files and prints on the standard output. The usage of it here is cat, some options, the file that you want to put out. It gives you all the different switches here. I'm going to press spacebar and just kind of go through this and then Q to get out of that. Or I can do cat, TAC-TAC-H, and it tells me here that I can use all these different switches, and here's some examples of how to use it. So anytime you don't really understand, or maybe I'm using something you've never heard of, give that a shot. Try man or TAC-TAC-H and you'll see a little bit more about the tool. Okay, I'm going to type clear to blank the screen for you. I don't want to get too much into the file structure here. It's already on Canvas. I do want to tell you how to move around though. So if we see here, I'm logged in as root and at Kali. So Kali is the name of this system here. And then it's got this little tilde here, and it's just the default directory that I'm in right now. So I can do pwd, present working directory, and it tells me currently I'm in the /root. So essentially imagine in Windows you've got the C drive, and then inside the C drive you have a bunch of other folders like users or documents and settings if you're on Windows XP, program files. You know, there's all those different folders that are in the C drive. Well, we have a similar thing here. So let's do cd, change directory to the root here. ls for list inside here, and we see I've got this Etsy, I've got home. Home is kind of like users in Windows. So if we do cd, change directories, home, let's look what's inside of it. I don't have anything in there because there's no other users, only the root user in here, but I might have my documents, desktop, folder. The root user, it's outside of there because it's different. It's like an administrative account. So if I go back here, ls, we see, where's my root? There we are. There's my root folder. So cd root. And now we see my desktop, documents, downloads, music, pictures, public. Very similar to something you might see in Windows there. It's just a little bit different. So let's clear the screen here. You can use ls in a couple different ways. So if I just do ls here, let me get my mouse back on the screen, and I see these folders here. That's cool. They're different colors. You'll learn about those a little bit later and what those mean as you start playing with this. But maybe I want to know more. Who owns these folders? What are the permissions to them? Are there any hidden directories? So one thing you could do to kind of organize this a little better and see the permissions is do an ls. Let's clear the screen first. ls-l. and I can see here what user owns this folder or has access to it, what group they're part of, and then the permissions here. So kind of like if you opened up a folder in Windows and you looked at the permissions there and it says, okay, everybody has read write, or just administrators have read write, or maybe just read. It works similarly here. It's a little bit more complicated, but you get the hang of that. I talk about exactly what these different sections mean on Canvas. We get the size of the file, the last date of the modified, and then what the file or folder is called here. So let me clear it again. What else do we want to talk about here? We did President Working Directory already. We really, in most Linux distributions, they suggest that you log in as a user and not use administrator or root. But in Kali, most of the tools are built to use root, and we need those extra permissions. So you can add a user if you want, but for the most part, we're just going to be logging in as root. What else we want to do here? You might want to make some files and folders. So let me change where I'm located, because if you remember PWD, I'm in the root. So let's look inside here. Let's add something on the desktop here. So change directories, desktop. I use tab there, so I typed DES tab, and it did desktop there. It knew what I wanted. On the desktop, I have these different files here, which we can see on my desktop there. Clear this. And so let's make a folder to start putting some of these tools in here. So I'll do make mkdir, make directory. Let's call it test here. Okay, and we can see that test folder just got created on my desktop here. Now maybe I want to put a file inside of there. Okay, so let's change directories and go inside the test here. I'll do touch test.txt. And there's a text file. So if I open this up in the GUI, I see a text file there, but obviously it's going to be blank. But I created that blank text file there. Okay, so let's put something inside another test folder here, or a test file. I'm going to clear the screen again. Okay, and let's do echo hello class, and let's do test file. Okay, and let's do a ls-l. And we see I've got those two different files there. I've got test file and test.txt. Oops, clear. And let's look inside of that. So we've got a couple different ways that we can start manipulating or opening or viewing files in Linux here. I can first, let's do cat. That's one of the tools we're going to use a lot. So I can do cat test file. And there we have the contents inside. So it's kind of looking inside the terminal window. What is actually inside this file here? Okay, we're not going to really be able to see too much of this because it's such a small file. But sometimes you have a huge file. For example, a word list or a dictionary list that we're using for brute force attacks or dictionary attacks. And I don't want to see all 10,000 lines of the files. I just want to see the top or the bottoms. Well, I could use head. And that's going to show me the top 10 lines. I only have one line, so it's not that great of an example. Or I can use tail, and it's going to show me the last 10 lines. In this case, again, it doesn't really matter because I only have one line of code there. I can also, if I want to start scrolling down, because if I have this huge file and I do a cat and it shows me every single line, just spits it out on my console window here, that might be a little bit much. So instead, what I can do is I can start manipulating the output of one command and put it into another command. So for example, we do cat. You know what? I think we need some more lines of text here to kind of give a better example of this. Let's add a little bit more text here. So hello to, let me add this to our test file. Oops, forgot the echo. Okay, let me just keep doing this. I'm pressing up arrow to get more lines here. And I'm doing that double brackets there just to tell it to kind of put this at the end of the file. So if we do cat test file, we're going to start seeing that it's been adding those lines at the end there. A single caret's going to put that content in the file and make that the only content in the file, and a bracket's going to add it to the bottom, or kind of, you imagine, append it to the end of the text file here. So let's do a couple more of these. 6, 7, 8, 9. Just going to add a bunch of text lines here. 10, 11, 12. Okay, and I think now I can better illustrate the head and the cat. So if I do cat test file, okay, we see this. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines of code here. And if I didn't want to see all of that, I just wanted to see the top rather than cat, I could do head, and we see it stops there at 10. It's only doing the first 10 lines of whatever's in that text file. I could do tail, and we're just seeing the bottom 10 lines of the code there. Okay, I had to pause there for a second to clear the screen. Let's look at editing a file. So let's say one of those files that we just created, we made a mistake on. Okay, so test file. There we go, test file. Okay, so I say hello class, and I really meant to say hello one. Okay, so I need to edit that. How do we do that? Well, there's a couple of different ways, and we can always pull up a text editor, one similar to Notepad, but I'm really trying to get you to use the command line and not really do that, use the GUI as much anymore. But if we need to bring up the GUI, there's gedit that's installed. It's similar to Notepad, so I could say gedit test file, and it pulls it up here. And I can make my change. So let's say I made a change there. I know it's 1000, but we're going to change that again in a second. Pretend we make another mistake. Okay, so we now do cat test file. Oh shoot, we did 1000 instead of 1. Okay, so let's make another change, but this time let's do it on the CLI versus the GUI. There's two main tools that people will talk about in a lot of tutorials, VI and Nano. If you want to use VI, a lot of old school and Unix people really recommend it. I find it to be a little bit more challenging to get used to, and you have to remember a couple more things. So I'm not going to show you VI. Feel free to do that if you want. I'm going to support Nano because that's the tool that I like here. So Nano is like a command line version of Notepad and Windows, and you can make changes and edit files here. So Nano test file. Okay, and we see the screen change here. So now we're in Nano 2.6.3, and we're editing test file, and I can start making changes. You can notice here my mouse really isn't doing anything. I can't do that. It's all command line, so I have to use my keyboard here. So I'm going to use my arrow keys and delete these zeros. You can see it now says modified. We have the options down here to exit, which would be this up arrow, which essentially means shift. I'm sorry, Control X controls the up arrow. And then I press Y for save, and it says, what do you want to call it? Well, it's already called test file, so I'm not going to change anything, so I'm going to press enter there. Okay, so now let's do a cat test file, and we see those changes were made. Okay, so that's how we can use Nano or any other tool or just command line tool to make changes to a text document in Linux. Okay, clear the screen again, and now let's just do a couple folder manipulations before I end this lecture here. So we have test file 2. Let's change the name of test file here now that we have two of them and make sure we can identify it and call it test file 1 instead of test file. There's not a rename function or an easy way to do it that I know of. The easiest way to do it is really use the move function. So kind of like cut and paste, but you're just changing the name when it's pasting. So I can do move test file, that's the source, and now where do I want to move it to? Well, I want to move it to the same spot, but I want to call it test file 1. Okay, and that's all it does. That's basically how we can rename it. We can also copy it. So let's say we really want test file 2, or you know what, let's move test.txt here to our desktop. So I can do move test.txt, and where do you want to move it to? I want to move it to root desktop, and we'll just put it right there, test.txt. Okay, we can see that showed up there. Okay, I can see now doing an ls that in my test folder it's gone. But what if I want to retain a copy here? So I want to move test file 2, and I want to keep it in this test folder, but I also want a copy to show up on the desktop. Let's take a look. I can do cp for copy, test file 2, and you notice I'm not really doing the source here. When I type test file 2, it's assuming I mean this current directory that I'm in, right? So I could do /, or I don't even need to do that because it's assuming I'm already here. Same thing. Source is test file 2, and again I'm copying it, so I should see a copy stay in the test folder and go to my desktop. So root desktop, test file 2. Oops, let's make sure we're case sensitive here. This isn't Windows. That looks good. So a copy showed up there. I should still have a copy in this test folder. We're good to go there. Okay, now I want to remove those items on my desktop. I don't need them anymore. So let me cd to desktop. I'm using the .. to take me down a directory. So right now I'm in this test directory doing a .. You can see will take me just to my desktop directory here. Okay, lsl, and I can see here that I've got my test file and test.txt. Let's clear the screen. Okay, so I did rm for remove test.txt. Now let me do rm test file 2, and that's gone as well. rm for remove. Be careful, there's a little trick that a lot of quote unquote hackers or experts like to pull on the newbies, and they like to use rm-rf asterisk, and that will basically remove your entire file system. This isn't Windows. It's not going to say, are you sure you want to delete everything, your C drive, check yes, click this, make sure, type in the secret word. No, rm-rf asterisk will remove your entire file structure without even asking you, and it'll be gone. And we'll have to rebuild your virtual machine, or I'll make you rebuild your virtual machine. So make sure you are very careful. You're running as root. You're basically like the god on the system, and just be careful with what you do there. Let me see if there's anything else I want to show you. We did move that nano. I think that's it for this lecture. I'm going to cut it off to keep it short, and we'll come back with using some of these tools in an actual practical example in the next video.